Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Yet another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. We're counting down to the end of the year. We're getting close to Hanukkah, getting close to the Christmas time. And we have Jacob Prash, the best gift we can have. Right, Jacob? How you doing?
Well, how am I doing? I'm so glad Jesus is coming. People can remember his first coming, and that's good. But I'm looking for his second.
Amen. Amen. And at the same time, we remind people he came the first time in like manner, he will come again the second
Amen.
time. Apart from sin, and this time he will bring salvation to those who await his return. And it has a lot to, the first, I think Jacob taught us at the very beginning, the first coming is like his second. That we learn about his first, we can learn about his second coming in a more clear way. So, Jacob, you're getting close to Hanukkah this weekend.
Yes, begins Hanukkah.
Yeah, what are you going to be doing? What's it like in the Prash family during Hanukkah season?
Well, we always like the Hanukkah. I try to refrain from the sufganiyot, which are like festal jam donuts. I try to keep away from them, but that's the traditional food, along with kind of a nishes or latkes, potato, like a potato type pastry, made of potatoes. That's the savory dish. Sufganiyot is the sweet dish. But unfortunately, most Jewish people celebrate it the way Christians celebrate Christmas. They don't understand this from the book of Daniel and the prophecies of Daniel being fulfilled by the Maccabees. They just do it with some reference to the story of the Maccabees, but not understanding its full theological implications, the way most people would say they celebrate Christmas and they would somehow know it's about the birth of Christ, but not really understand what that means, that God became a man to atone for our sin and to bring salvation. So it's very much like Christmas culturally in the Jewish community. The story is there, but not the spiritual meaning of the story for most people. Even fewer understand that Jesus celebrated Hanukkah in John chapter 10. What the meaning of Jesus celebrating in the Jewish feast of light and miracles, Hanukkah, means doctrinally and theologically in John's gospel. Also, of course, Daniel 12 is chapter 12, 11 and 12 is pivotal in understanding the last days. The events of Hanukkah transpire again at the close of the age. What Antiochus Epiphanes did, the Antichrist, is going to recapitulate. So it has an important meaning for the return of Christ and what precedes the return of Christ. We've always brought our children up to understand all of these aspects, but I'm wearing my Hanukkah shirt.
There you go.
9 instead of the normal 7 in a candelabra. There are 9, one for each day of Hanukkah, that's 8. And then the middle one called the Shamash, which you use to light the others. The first night you light 1, the second night you light 2, third night you light 3, always using the Shamash to light the others. This is the background of John 10. Of course, Jesus being the light of the world. He's the light that gives light to the other lights.
Amen. Amen. Now, what do they call that middle one? The tallest one?
The Shamash, which is also the Hebrew word for servant or deacon.
Servant. So the servant lights up all the other ones, right?
That's right.
It's all there. Jesus came to not to be served, but to serve.
Amen.
Life as a ransom for many. So that's great. I love that. I love the turkey too. That's good stuff.
Yes.
Well, that's the Hanukkah story, and that's the Hanukkah and the Prash family. It's going to last. It was going to last 8 days, and in the Christmas season here, I guess it lasts 1 day. So
yes.
Hanukkah, Christmas, it all points to Jesus. The Nativity, of course,
Amen.
is our aim and our focus. And as the book of Matthew says, his name will be called Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.
Amen.
What a wonderful story. And you're right, Jacob. It has become, in a lot of ways, it's always been traditional, and it's become part of the holiday season, they call it. And many people forget the reality of why we even have Christmas, let alone the fact that, he wasn't born on December 25th. That's the day people commemorate and celebrate it. But the reality is he did come. He did come to save
Yes.
sinners, and very few people know that.
We have left-wing, the left-wing idiocracy of Great Britain. I'm sure America has the equivalent, but the British left-wing idiocracy want to stop using terms like Christmas because it could be offensive or alienating to Muslims or Hindus or Buddhists. Of course, they can have Diwali and Ramadan and so
Oh,
forth,
yeah.
but Christmas shouldn't say Christmas, or it should just be celebrated with Father Christmas, which is what the British call Santa Claus, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Christmas trees are okay, but the nativity of Jesus isn't. And
Yeah.
there are organizations demanding that stables, nativity scenes be taken down on lawns of churches and from public buildings, libraries. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
Of course, I'll never say anything about Ramadan or Diwali.
Exactly. It's the same thing here. It's the same thing here, and I'm sure in other parts of the world where multiculturalism and interfaith and all those wonderful things they say that brings value to every society. You know, when it comes to that, of course, Christianity is the one thing that is not tolerated or brought
That's
into,
right.
and then brought into. So goes the world, Jacob. So goes the world. But we're not like the world. We're going to talk about Jesus.
What they don't understand is this is exactly what happened in the Roman Empire. Every religion was tolerated except for Christianity.
Yeah, and it brought forth great persecution later on.
Correct.
Great persecution.
Then after the Christians, they went after the Jews. That's exactly what happened then, and it's what's going to happen now.
Jacob, any thoughts on that before we get started? The silver coins that were found in Jerusalem at the Ophel, at the excavation, the Second Temple area, Second Temple.
Well, they proved that Barack Obama is an anti-Semitic liar. Barack Obama refused to block the UNESCO vote, saying that Israel had no historical or cultural claims to the Wailing Wall or Jerusalem or the Temple area. And he lobbied and pressured the British government and the New Zealand government to vote against Israel, with the UNESCO declaration that Israel had no historical or cultural claims to the Wailing Wall. Islam does, but not the Jews. Of course, it also overlooks the fact that you have radical Muslim preachers saying that all of Jerusalem belongs to Islam, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They demand hegemony over the Christian sites as well as the Jewish sites, but it's not politically expedient to say that. These coins prove that Barack Obama is an anti-Semitic liar.
Very true. Now,
and Samantha Powers, his UN representative, who was born in Ireland, is an anti-Semitic liar.
Very true. I remember that vote too. It was just a shame and a sham. But these coins, Jacob, they go back to the time of the Maccabees. It's kind of
they prove that during the Second Temple period and the Hasmonean period, back to the Maccabean period, that the Jews were the indigenous people.
Crazy stuff. I mean, it's there. The Bible tells us it's there, but very, very few people like that read the Bible.
That's correct.
Interesting stuff. So at the time of Hanukkah, you got these proof. It's an amazing thing. Great excavation. They're very rare, I read. They're very rare. Not that many have been found, and they found these 15 of them.
Yes, it is a major find. However, other coinage has been found before.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting stuff. All right, Jacob. We're on podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on Vimeo. We're on a lot of platforms like Rumble. We want to welcome everyone. We're on Facebook as well. We're on Telegram. We're also on RTN and more and more prominently, Moriel.tv. Moriel.tv. And you can find Jacob there. You can find a lot of things there. And you can find videos, old videos, newer videos, and the library keeps growing. Podcast.
I'd like to urge people to please watch us on Moriel.tv, MorielTV.org, or Rumble, or RTN, or one of the alternative platforms. The more people that don't watch us on YouTube, the better it is for them, and the better it is for us. YouTube obviously is no friend of Christians, no friend of any people who have Judeo-Christian moral or family values. Certainly no friend of anybody who does not toe a left-wing political agenda. So we're on YouTube, but we're on enough other platforms that you have alternatives and choices to not have to go to YouTube. Please avail yourself of them.
Very much a lot of choices. So we welcome all those who are watching and all the other platforms, including YouTube and Facebook. And at some point during this episode, we're going to ask people to jump over from YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and jump over to Rumble and Moriel.tv specifically, as well as Telegram and the other platforms, so that we will be able to broadcast backstage. We got a lot of good stuff on backstage today. Excellent videos, some information about mRNA technology that's coming out, and we're gonna get Jacob's take on that. So welcome those who are watching, and welcome those who are gonna watch later. And we're so blessed to have Jacob. We're blessed to have you on live stream. And of course, when we get to backstage, it'll be great to have you there as well. So we'll give you plenty of notice when we're getting down to the end of this episode, so you can jump over to the other platforms and join us on backstage, because there are certain things that, even though there's a lot of truth coming out about all these other things that we've talked about here and catching up, we're still not able to freely broadcast them on certain platforms. They still don't want you to say certain things. So what we do is we take our stuff and we take it somewhere else. And Moriel.tv is a good place to start. And also podcasts. So if you are a big fan of podcasts, which increasingly more people are, grab a hold of Jacob's podcast. They're on Buzzsprouts, they're on iTunes, they're on Spotify, they're on many other platforms that you can find on Moriel.org. And you could also find them on the website, Moriel.org, and on Moriel.tv. You can find the podcast there and avail yourself of wonderful teachings from Jacob, from Sandy, from yours truly. And as we add on more and more will come. So podcast is easy way to share, easy way to listen, easy way to be on the road, jogging, cooking, cleaning, wherever you're doing. Amen. It's an easy way to find some really good Bible studies. And increasingly more people are saying, where can we find good Bible studies, good churches and all that? Well, we can help in that field by offering some good Bible studies that people can be edified. All right, Jacob, enough with the pleasantries. Let's get on with catching up. Let's catch up. Jacob, Russians sending warnings, and I guess we're getting closer and closer to an inevitable confrontation. Although some people say it may not happen, I'm of the opinion that it could happen. Maybe not tomorrow, not yet, not a time soon, but eventually something has to give. And the confrontation seems to be surrounding Russia, U.S., Ukraine. And we'll touch on it for a few minutes. It's the Russia sending warnings to the U.S. about the usage of Patriot missile defense system given to the Ukraine. Now, this is a big problem for Russia, who's been attacking Ukraine. And now if the U.S. gives them this defense missile system, it could be a game changer. But on December 13th, the intentions of the U.S. to provide Patriot anti-missile defense system was announced. And of course, Russia didn't take it too well. And now the threat abides with the Russians over the U.S. over this specific situation. Any thoughts on that, Jacob? I mean, it's like we're inching closer every week.
Well, Putin's strategy, in his frustration that things have not gone well, has been to retrench or make a strategic withdrawal of his troops to the east side of the Dnieper River and so forth. Wait for the ground to harden before he makes a new offensive. That is his basic plan. And in the meantime, he's trying to integrate these conscripts into the mainstream Russian army, get them properly trained for the advance. In the meanwhile, inflicting as much damage to the national infrastructure of the Ukraine as possible, making its civilian population suffer. This is exactly what he did with the Chechens, the Muslims, and ironically, the Chechen Muslims are supporting him in the Ukraine, even though he did the same thing to them. Some Chechens are not. And this is what he did in Syria, particularly Christian populations being arch victims, anybody who opposed Assad. He terrorizes the civilian population. That's his basic strategy. If you can't beat the soldiers on the battlefield, you murder the civilians. Hitler and Goebbels resorted to this, obviously, with the Blitz when they attacked London and when they leveled Coventry, England, and so forth. They got themselves into a situation where they began losing the war, so they began indiscriminately firing V2 missiles at London. Not at military targets, just shooting it at London. Go after the civilians, terrorize the civilians. This is the Nazi strategy, and it is very much a Putin strategy. Well, of course, it precedes Putin. Stalin did similar things, but this is the basic strategy. So while the Russians have had severe setbacks, as we've been saying, this has been a proxy war with NATO to a large degree. There are NATO, CIA, Western intelligence trained and equipped mercenaries doing a fair amount of the fighting in the Ukraine. A lot of the Ukrainian so-called special forces are American trained and armed, and also British sponsorship of the Ukrainian military. So the HIMARS systems, the Javelin missiles, and so forth, these are American ordnance that have inflicted considerable damage upon the Russian military. But it is not Russia against the Ukraine. Ukraine has been slaughtered by the Russians. The casualty figures of Ukrainians killed is astronomical. Probably as many Ukrainians, if you count the civilians, possibly even more Ukrainians, have been killed by Russia than Russia by Ukrainians. It is the NATO muscle and involvement by proxy that makes the difference. Now, of course, Ukraine is not a NATO country, so NATO troops cannot directly enter into the Ukraine. They're therefore using mercenaries and so forth.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. Putin's concurrent strategy is to attack the Ukrainian infrastructure. Moriel is sending more of these heater ovens.
Yeah.
You can cook on them and use them for household heating because there's no electricity, there's no gas cooking or heating. These things are decimated by Russian drone and artillery attacks and so forth. The Russian Air Force has not performed all that well. A lot of this is being done by drones supplied by Iran in large measure. So the Patriot missiles were an American invention, but they were improved after the first Gulf War in 1991. They were quite successful against Saddam Hussein's Scud missiles being fired at Saudi Arabia and being fired at Israel. They were quite successful, but they have been improved based on the combat experience of 1991. There have also been Israeli participation in the improvement of the Patriot system in joint research and development programs for the Israeli Arrow system and the Iron Dome. Okay, so a lot of the technology is Israeli or American-Israeli together. Okay, a lot of the Israeli technology is in part American, but America in turn borrows back some of that technology to improve its defenses against drone weapons. Okay, Iron Dome is the best example. Now, Ukraine's not going to get an Iron Dome system, but they will get Patriot missiles. Large-sized drones, pilotless planes, can be taken out quite effectively by Patriots. So what this will do is retard damage, not stop, but retard and damage Putin's capacity to attack civilian targets in his efforts to terrorize the Ukrainian people and destroy the national infrastructure. This is why he's so angry. What, you won't let me destroy the electrical grid? You won't let me destroy neighborhoods? You won't let me terrorize the civilian population of the Ukraine with my drones? You're going to... help them to shoot my drones down. He's quite angry. That's his arrogance, but it's also his desperation. I think his saber rattling needs to be taken seriously, but so far his bark has usually been worse than his bite. He was threatening a nuclear response. He was threatening a full-scale land invasion, which he actually attempted, but did not succeed in his attack on Kiev. He says these things and he tries to play brinkmanship because he's a person who is strategically frustrated, but politically he's desperate. Now, again, Ukraine is not doing that well.
Right.
And Russia is not doing as badly as the mainstream media portrays.
Right.
But
No.
Russia's not doing well either. Nobody's doing well in this particular mess. Nobody.
It's a horrible war. And like usually in wars, there's the biggest people the biggest losers, people that lose are basically civilians. Yeah. And it's hard to tell in the cloud of war, in the smoke of war, what exactly is happening.
Yes.
There's so much information and propaganda. Well, one propagandist that came out, and I want your take on this, Jacob, and I know how you feel about it, but I think for people to know is, the Pope has been a globalist. He's been talking Marxist stuff for a long time. Recently, he came out and he said, look, in his last few messages of the year, he warned of apocalyptic, cataclysmic end of the year scenario where 2023 is going to look really terrible. Wars, famine, all these things. And he says, we need to cut back on spending. We need to cut back on spending and materialism. But he says, send your money to Ukraine. Whatever you save, send the money to Ukraine. On the one hand, I wanted to ask you, obviously, people that are new to Moriel and are watching it, maybe you can explain a little bit more why we don't even take the Pope seriously on this. I know people are on about this and going like, well, the Holy Father has sent this, and so it must mean something. But let's shed some light into what Pope has said in the past and what he means by sending money to Ukraine and his globalist agenda, because he is just the same as any other globalist.
Something has happened to the Roman Church, to the Vatican, and the Roman papacy. There have been low ebbs before historically, such as when Victor Emmanuel and Garibaldi overthrew the Papal States and established Italy as a democratic country. Don't forget, Italy fought for their independence from the Pope the way the Americans fought the British. But it was negotiated. And then the papacy gained greater ascending control in Italy under Mussolini. But for the first time in a long time, the papacy is discredited. It began with Pope Benedict, the predecessor of the present Pope, because of his protection of pedophiles. Systematically and systemically on a global scale, the global systematic protection of pedophiles at the expense of not protecting the children by the hierarchy of the Roman Church with the knowledge of the Pope. Okay, it became discredited to the point where something that was unthinkable happened. The Pope was forced to retire. Benedict was forced to retire. It was political intervention by Condoleezza Rice that the Bush administration wouldn't indict him. There were grounds to actually indict him, and other members of the Roman Catholic clergy probably could have been indicted by RICO prosecutions. Nonetheless, over pedophilia. Nonetheless, that was the beginning. They needed a new pope to try to resuscitate the credibility and prestige of the papacy. And instead, they got this loser from Argentina, who also was soft on the issue of pedophilia, but who was a left-wing Jesuit.
Yeah.
Influenced undoubtedly by Bonino, Sobrino, and the left-wing so-called liberation theologians of the Roman Church in Latin America in the 1960s. Desmond Tutu being the Protestant equivalent. Okay. So they got this loser. So you have a loser followed by a loser. After the loser, they needed a winner. Now, by a winner, I don't mean a righteous man or a moral man. I simply mean somebody who can present himself as being that. Whether he is or not is something else. I don't believe there's such a thing as a moral pope. You know, the moral pope is like having a moral mob boss. It doesn't exist, you know. But somebody who can present himself as being that. Instead of getting somebody who can salvage the credibility of the papacy, they have somebody who's even damaged it further.
Oh, yeah.
So the Roman Catholic Church in countries like Austria and in Latin America and in Ireland and in Poland, it does not have the punch or the weight it once had. Yeah. Have you heard the Pope says this or the Pope said that? Among Catholic people, particularly among younger Catholic people, but not only younger ones. Who cares? Who cares what he said?
Yeah.
The Roman Church has become a brood of silly old people with a woefully blind eye to reality. In Ireland, one of the most Catholic countries in the world traditionally, it really is, or had been, the Roman Catholic Church did what it did everywhere. The Roman Catholic Church never did anything for Ireland except exploit its people, corrupt its government, and molest its children. That's what the Roman Catholic Church did for Ireland. And it did so under the New York City-born tutelage of Eamon de Valera, the first Taoiseach, the first prime minister, who then became president of Ireland. When the Pope had a headache, Ireland took a pill. That's when I was a kid, everything, the pedophilia, no newspaper would dare report it. No policeman would dare arrest a priest. People, that is gone. It's gone. The Moriel office for our branch in Ireland is in a place called Maynooth. Maynooth is where the Roman Catholic National Seminary is, and is the functional headquarters, along with Armagh is the more ceremonial, traditional headquarters, but Maynooth is the functional headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church in Ireland. When I was a kid, you'd see nuns and priests on the streets all over the place. Every other person you saw was clergy or some. They're all gone. A nun is some old lady somewhere, you know, they're gone. It's over. They're not respected, they're not trusted, and they're not there. It's over. It doesn't matter even to Catholics what the Pope says. Now, I do believe the following. The only way the Roman Catholic Church can be revived in terms of its power and prestige will not be by any religious means per se, or any resuscitation of traditional Catholicism or anything like that. The false prophet of the Antichrist will play a role in reviving religious relevance of things like the Vatican, and will use supernatural counterfeit signs and wonders and so forth in order to empower the Antichrist.
Right.
That is the only hope for the Roman Catholic Church institutionally, is the Antichrist. Every pope is an Antichrist. Right, he says he's the vicar of Christ, but they're going to get the Antichrist. They're going to get the false prophet who will lead this religious confederation. Nothing can ever save the Roman Catholic Church spiritually or morally. Nothing. Nothing. That was 1,000 years ago. Nothing can save it. But can it be saved politically? Well, yes, it can, by satanic power. And that is what is going to be its blessed hope.
Its own version of the blessed hope. Yeah. It is amazing to think, you know, I grew up Catholic. Many of my family members are still Catholics. And obviously the gospel shed light into our hearts, and we could see the truth. And so we, you know, a lot of it, our dedication is to help people that are come from the Catholic background to see the gospel, to see the face of Jesus,
Yes.
of the gospel of Jesus Christ, light of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ, and which is the only way to be saved, not through the church, not through sacraments and the works that the Catholic Church does. But one thing for sure, its influence has diminished, but it's been a laughing stock. It's a joke now to see the Pope say things like this. Although some weird stuff, he begins to talk about the end of the world and things like that. I think that's how people begin to hear this stuff. He resorts to end of the world apocalyptic scenario. He sees it and he tries to make some kind of sense to it, but by involving himself in politics again, which brings up to another Irish guy, which is Joe Biden. Jacob, he signed the Respect of Marriage Act on the White House, and he immediately goes on a rant about opponents of child sex changes are racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic. Really?
Yeah, it's not the rights of parents who don't want their children indoctrinated with that stuff. The FBI puts them on a terrorist watch list. It's not their rights he's concerned with. It's the rights of people who are trying to push a homosexual agenda onto children, with the blessings of a backslidden, phony U.S. senator who claims to be a born-again Christian from the state of Wyoming. That woman, I have more respect for a prostitute on a street corner than I do for the so-called Christian senator from Wyoming who voted for that bill, forcing other states to accept same-sex marriage against the will of its majority voting population. What is her name? Senator Wiss.
Yeah, Dave, if you can look that one up, that would be great. I forget her name. She is from Wyoming, and she even said that she agrees that her church is against homosexuality, and the church is against same-sex marriage, and she agrees with her church, but it says, but it comes to politics and society, is a whole different thing. She says we have to be more willing to compromise at a social level, but which she had to eat her words.
The way it looks is that a whore on a street corner on Sunset Boulevard has a better chance of getting through the pearly gates than she does.
Yeah. Well, it was so hypocritical. It was so hypocritical of her, as well as the Mormon Romney, as well as the other.
Well, what do you expect from Romney?
Exactly. But some of these people claim to be conservative, even Christians like the senator, and it's destroyed.
12 of them, 12 Republicans.
And now Biden is coming out and says, look, whoever opposes this is transphobic. Well, not transphobic, sorry. It is anti-Semitic, homophobic, and racist. If you don't like your kids changing sex, then it says they're all connected. You're part of that. And yet his the very policies that has allowed people parents not even being involved in the decision making when a child goes to school.
Yes.
And they keep that. And even Sam Britton was he's been fired now for stealing women's luggage, but he was a federal official. He in the energy department, access to nuclear codes and all that stuff. He was involved in making the policy in schools.
Yes.
Parents, what they call them, unaffirming parents. So if parents
just look at the photos of that guy, that bald-headed homosexual with the women's dresses that he probably got from the luggage he stole. He had access to nuclear secrets in the Biden White House.
Amazing, isn't it?
What we see happening is God giving the nation over to a depraved mind. There were people who'd actually vote for this. The media won't even speak against it or comment on it in any kind of critical or even objective way. That person is in the Biden White House formulating policy and having access to nuclear secrets. He's been arrested, of course, twice for stealing luggage in airports. He had White House ID.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's unbelievable that he
This is
did.
what Biden is.
Let alone his policies that allows transgender to be part of his federal government. We'll talk about that in a moment because
And he says, if you speak against this, you're some kind of a phobic fascist.
yeah,
Now they're using the term drag phobia. That if you
yeah,
think this is unnatural or wrong, even though the New Testament says it is, there's something wrong with you.
I know. Now he had we'll talk about this one at the end on backstage, but during the Respect of Marriage Act, he brought drag queens into at the signing of the Marriage Act, and he had them at the White House.
Yes.
And this particular one is very interesting. We'll talk about it at the end because we can't talk about it here. And the Biden administration encourages it, encourage drag queen shows and sex changes for kids. It is just unbelievable.
They encourage it for children and they bring it into the White House.
Yeah,
This is Joe Obama.
this is exactly right. This is exactly right. And yet they claim to be some kind of moral higher ground.
I remember before I was a Christian, there was a film that shocked people that anybody could make such a film. It was made by that very peculiar filmmaker from Baltimore. He was sort of like Baltimore's version of Andy Warhol. And he made this film called Pink Flamingos. And it was so shocking that anybody could be so perverse and unnatural and disgusting. This film shocked people. I didn't see it at the time, but I've seen clips of it on documentaries. And now it is mainstream. Mainstream and the White House.
Promoted by the White House, exactly right.
Promoted by the President of the United States, Pink Flamingo, Miss Divine.
Yeah.
I think the director's name was John Waters or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that one, but it
was unbelievable. Yeah, you probably were still in Latin America at the time.
Now they of course want to do a couple of things aside from destroying kids' lives. They literally want to, number one, destroy Trump. They literally brought in a new bill barring him from running regarding the 14th Amendment, the insurrection provision. They're trying to keep him from running. They're introducing his new bill. And of course, the Twitter files have exposed him completely. His administration working, the agencies, secret agencies, the information, what is it, FBI, CIA?
Yes, the intelligence community, the deep
state.
state.
With the technology companies, and none of the media covers it. Absolutely none of the media covers it.
You know, why are people like John Brenner and Clapper not under indictment?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And John Brenner has actually been outspoken about it lately, saying, people shouldn't go on Twitter anymore because it's telling lies. And I like to bring John Brennan to before a trial and put him before Congress and have him answer a few questions. But nonetheless, the Twitter files have exposed this. We're going to talk about the Twitter files a little bit later because there's going to be a third dump of information that's coming. So that's going to be unique to that because it's exposing a lot of things, including Fauci and all that stuff. So Musk is doing, I guess, what Musk said he was going to do. He was going to expose all this, and now the Twitter files are out, and the U.S. government is involved. But guess who's also trying to threaten him to sanctions is the EU.
EU, yes.
The EU does not want him to say anything. Yes. Jacob, are these governments, the U.S. government, the agencies, the EU, they don't want him to say anything because of the implications?
First of all, they're globalists. They're anti-free speech. They're anti-First Amendment. And if there is somebody who will allow the freedom of information, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, they want to be Pravda and Izvestia. They want to control what the people can hear. They want to be able to simply report the news as they want people to hear it and ignore things they don't want people to hear. They want the media to be the way ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, and other such garbage already are. They want to do that universally. They want to do it what Facebook is and what YouTube is. And if there's anything dissident, they hate it. They don't like Fox, but they hate things like Newsmax.
Yeah.
Or they hate things certainly like Elon Musk. They are a threat to their agenda, which, as I've said before, it has elements of fascism, it has elements of socialism, it has elements of robber baron capitalism. But what it really is cyber feudalism, neo feudalism,
Cyber feudalism,
high-tech feudalism, where the
That's
people are slaves and serfs, and then the bootlickers, the bureaucrats, the media are the vassals, and the Soroses of the world are, of course, the nobility. That is what they want.
Yeah. What did you call it, Jacob? Feudalism? What is it? Techno-feudalism? What did you call it?
Cyber feudalism, techno-feudalism, yes.
Yeah. Mark it down. I think Jacob coined a term here. Mark it down. I don't know
Techno-feudalism.
I haven't heard anybody say that, but that's absolutely right.
I haven't either, but that's how I would describe it. Techno-feudalism.
NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, ABC has spent just 14 minutes at all, total combined regarding these Twitter files, even though there's been 2 information dumps. The biggest story I think in my lifetime is the fact that now there's no questioning that the government is after free speech, colluding with tech companies to destroy. And if you talk about kids being transgenderism and sex changes and all that, they'll ban you, they'll censor you, right? If you are like BitChute, let's talk about BitChute for a moment. This is one of our platforms. It's been was created to battle against YouTube. It was an alternative to YouTube at one point. Other things like Rumble and stuff like that came back after that. But the creator of BitChute, one of the founding members, his bank account has been frozen by HSBC for 2 years. They've been holding funds from the founder of BitChute, so they don't want BitChute to continue. They don't want BitChute to thrive under this monopoly that they created. And BitChute has been a great platform to communicate lots of truth, things that you couldn't promote on YouTube. Now they went against them, and they probably go against other platforms later.
The techno-feudalists see government as their personal political police force. Government sees mainstream media and Silicon Valley as their propaganda machine. There's a hand-in-glove relationship that's commutative, works both ways. If you are not part of that system, either on a political level or a financial media level, you're a threat to the techno-feudalists.
Yeah, the establishment. Yeah, the techno-establishment that they have.
Techno-feudalism, let's call it that.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, in reality, Jacob, with working with the banks now, they can literally freeze your account immediately.
Well, Trudeau pioneered that in Canada, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. The reality that HSBC for 2 years has held their funds. This is, and we barely finding out now because it's probably the news has been censored.
Yes,
the news has been censored for sure. Now, Jacob, in regards to, that's one thing with the techno world that's going on there. But what they don't show you on the news and what they don't show you in any of these tech things is the fact that the violence in different cities across the world, the US, UK, France specifically, and Germany, so we look at the big four countries there, are just completely out of control. One example would be LA. LA, the homelessness problem it's just, so far, the new mayor says it's a state of emergency. The drugs, the fentanyl use, it is unbelievable what is happening in those cities. San Francisco, it's California as well, video showing that you can get all kinds of paraphernalia to do drugs, syringes and stuff like that. But yet no one is being advised to go to a rehab center, to go get clean, to go get right. And this has been coming. This has been coming into major cities like LA, San Francisco. And we're 5 days away here from Title 42 expiring and a whole lot of chaos and surging at the border, because now we have migrants, undocumented migrants coming in from China, from other parts of the world, not only Latin America, but other parts of the world coming through, Haitians. They've been held back by Title 42.
Islamists among them.
And it'll expire on December 21st. So you got 5 more days. What kind of environment are you going to see at the border, Jake? I mean, the next time
it's going to be even worse than it is. Notice certain things that are happening concurrently with what Biden is doing. He's threatening to take states like Arizona to federal court for putting up their own walls using empty containers. He's saying that's a federal government's mandate legally, not the states. Yeah, but the federal government's not doing it. Yeah, but it's not your mandate. We'll sue you if you do it. You can't do it just because we're not. You can't protect your own state. The federal government has to. And if we refuse to, that's our choice. And then people will still vote for a Democrat senator.
Well, look at Chicago. Lightfoot just got caught for hiding the violence from the media. She literally was hiding numbers and hiding videos from the media. So not that MSNBC, CBS was going to cover it anyway, because they're trying to hide it, but she herself was caught basically exploiting it by hiding the violence. This is amazing.
Look, if you're a Democrat in Chicago and you voted for Spitzer or Lightfoot and you get shot dead, well, I'm glad you got your wish.
Yeah.
That's what you voted for, is what you got. I'm not going to weep at your funeral.
So you got Islamists, you got drug cartels, you got Chinese fentanyl coming through. You got, under the administration of the Biden administration, they gave you free crack pipes, the promotion of violence and drugs.
It's not only that, but he's now saying that illegal immigrants, American taxpayers, have to fund their health care. You're going to have people climbing that wall, entering the country illegally for free health care that you're going to have to pay for.
Yeah, it's just unreal. I mean, and it's
now, if you're a Democrat and you wind up hungry, I have no problem with that, because that's what you voted for.
Yeah.
But the rest of the people in more conservative states shouldn't have to go hungry. Only you should have to go hungry, because that's what you chose.
Jacob, do you agree that at some point the rubber band is gonna swing back the other way? You can stretch it and it's gonna snap back, and you're gonna have vigilantes. You're gonna have people taking matters into their own hands, and then it creates a bigger problem by allowing. Look, California wants to reduce the prison population. They're closing prisons. They don't want prisoners anymore. People with major crimes don't even have to serve sentence anymore. They're completely opening up the floodgates at the border. At some point, there's just a citizen will have to protect itself. Not that the Democrats are trying to do everything they can not to do that, to keep them from doing that. So is there just is a powder keg ready to explode here?
Here is the danger. Look at what happened in Weimar, Germany, during the Depression in Germany, when Germany was under the Versailles Treaty, during the Depression in the 1920s, 1930s. There was a general moral breakdown. The film and the Broadway musical Cabaret is played out against the background of what happened. The Liza Minnelli thing played out against the background of what was actually happening in Germany at the time. It is inevitable that there will be a backlash. When you go into disintegration and chaos and people are terrified, and somebody comes along and promises stability and prosperity, you're going to get a dictator. We know, however, that the ultimate dictator who's going to con people, that he's some kind of a messiah savior, is going to be the Antichrist. supported by the false prophet, who's also an antichrist. It's going to be religious, political, and economic. And it is coming. That is what is taking place.
With the fact that, along with the fact that they're trying to trample on freedom of speech, freedom to self-defense, and things like that.
Yes.
You have things in the UK, Jacob, just jumping over the Atlantic here. And we heard from Nigel Farage. He says he was wrong because he said it was going to be it was going to be like 300 hotels that are going to be used for housing illegal boat migrants.
It's close to 500 now.
Yeah, he says he apologized. He was underestimating. He said it's over 400 for sure, close to 500. 4- and 5-star hotels at a tune of £7 million per day. £7 million
under a worthless prime minister, a Hindu, who misrepresents himself as a conservative.
Yeah.
He is the British equivalent of an establishment Republican. He's the British equivalent of a Romney or a McCain or a Murkowski or a Collins. That's what he is. Wow. And he's a Hindu. He's a worshiper of other gods. Yeah. This is the Tory party. What would happen if it was a Labor government?
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. It is out of control.
Out of control.
There are very few towns unaffected by this, and yet here in America we hardly ever hear it unless you go to independent media. Unless you go independent media, or you go to media that is being it's uncensored, and you get videos from the UK live, and you can see citizens warning about what's happening. And yet it's like nothing. It's like, according to the Tory party, nothing's really bad happening. Everything is good. We're coming out of the recession, they say. Now
they're not
in
coming
France,
out of the recession. They're going further into one.
In France, it's even worse. Paris, again, there was a game in Qatar, thousands of miles away, between Morocco and France, and the Moroccan fans raided Paris, set things on fire because of the game. I mean, Morocco ended up losing. God knows what they would have done if they would have won. But it was filled with violence in Paris by these migrants. So there were migrants from Morocco that live in.
And they were
France.
angry because they lost the game.
Yeah. But it just reminded me. Remember that time you were in Paris? I think you were there, or you had just left there in like 2012, 2013, and they surrounded Paris.
Yeah, the Banlieue was on fire.
Man. For 3 weeks, yeah, and it's gotten worse because Macron's policy has gotten even more lenient toward allowing migrants from other countries to come in.
You know, thank God you have a conservative in Italy. She's a wonderful woman, but they're calling her a Mussolini.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have a conservative who's going to stop this nonsense, you are going to get a Mussolini. A real Mussolini.
Yeah.
A 666 Mussolini is what's coming to Europe.
Wow. Now in Germany, there was rape, and unfortunately it's become a normal thing. And there was recently a young girl that was killed by a migrant from Eritrea, a Muslim from Eritrea. There was a 14-year-old girl that was gang rape.
By Afghanistan.
Yeah. And this man is now being protected by police because they say, well, we don't want people to retaliate against this man because of because of the other man who killed that other girl. Now this girl was raped, gang raped. Now police is protecting a rapist.
Yep.
Because people have had enough. And this is in Germany.
They'll protect everybody except their own citizens.
Yeah. Violence has erupted just like the days of Noah.
There are Muslims. There are Muslims. I don't say all Muslims, but there are Muslims. And even many of the ones who say they don't agree with it really do, but who think it's okay to do that to an infidel woman.
Wow. Now, I talked to a couple of friends of mine from the UK, but Birmingham,
yes,
has been saturated with Islamic refugees.
Saturated.
Yeah. What's the other place? Birmingham, up in Bradford, and where was that place?
Manchester.
Manchester, but where that Nottingham, was it Nottingham?
Nottingham, yes.
Yeah, the place where they basically were running a sex.
Oh no, that was in Rotherham.
Rotterdam. Thank you.
Rotherham,
Thank you.
near Sheffield.
Yes, that's the one. It was years ago, but it never
And
stopped.
the police covered it up because they didn't want to offend the Islamic community. So English girls are being pimped off. Underage English girls are being pimped off. The local labor government knew about it. And the police hands were tied from doing anything about it because they didn't want to offend the Islamic community. This is Britain. Look, these things are God's judgment.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
God's judgment on Britain. It's God's judgment on America.
Now, another thing Rishi Sunak is really trying to push, Jacob, and this is I'm going to go to Jeremy Hunt here. He's the new exchequer. That was Rishi Sunak's former position under Bojo. But here's Jeremy Hunt, who wants to introduce, backed by the Prime Minister, what they call Edinburgh reforms. Edinburgh reforms. I have no idea what they call an Edinburgh reforms. Maybe you can shed light on that if you know. But the UK, backed by the Bank of England, was preparing to introduce a digital pound.
Yes.
Essentially trackable digital currency, spyware, trackable surveillance, and of course, this is a big thing that they want to introduce because they say it's going to make our economy better. So what they're basically trying to do is it's going to be a better spending. You're going to control spending, they say. They're going to control spending, and they're going to bring a better balance to the economy. Now, better spending, is it because they could just print more money? They don't have to print it anymore. They could just add a few zeros.
Not only that, but they want to tell people what people can do with their money.
Yeah. So the social credit score is coming right behind that.
Yes.
And in surveillance, because obviously they'll know everything that you're buying. And
we are coming to techno-feudalism. There's a reason. There's a reason Harari is a professor of medieval history.
Interesting.
Because medieval Europe was feudalism.
Yeah.
There's a reason you see the rise of Islamic influence, and they're not wanting to offend Saudi Arabia in these things.
Yeah.
Because Saudi Arabia has feudalism.
It is basically feudalism. You're absolutely right. The development of smart cities, which is something the Saudis have been developing for some time now. Now they got the new project, NEOM. It's coming. But they're warning. Obviously, some people are warning about the UK preparing for this because it's going to be the first of its kind in Europe, the digital currency. I mean, considering England, it's not the EU, but it's in the continent, basically an island of the continent. Complete with smart cities developing later on, you could see the marriage of digital currency like this and smart cities. Yes. What about the carbon border tariff that the EU is imposing now? The European Union's to decarbonize Europe. It's now going to tariff on carbon dioxide emissions on goods from countries considered climate abusers. So if you are considered a climate
that would have to be China.
I don't think China's going to be on their list, but
that would have to be China, followed by India.
Oh man, yeah. Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, second half of 2023. Now, Jacob, you and I have talked about man-made climate change for a while. And recently, you talked about Buttigieg and John Kerry and their green hypocrisy. But the reality is that even Biden here in America is supporting this green agenda by making deals with Zaire,
the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is not democratic and it's not a republic. It's just the Congo.
Famous for
child slave under Mobutu, and it's even more corrupt now. They have child slave labor in cobalt mining. Most of these mines are owned by China. China does not care about mine safety. It does not care about radiation exposure. It doesn't care how many black children die. China just doesn't care. Apparently, either does Joe Obama.
No, it doesn't. And the reminder too, the green climate change agenda that they have, it's all built on the fact that you're going to have lithium, cobalt, all these energy sources, right, as well as solar, but especially cobalt. And that's being, people just think that cobalt, you can just get it at Target or Walmart or in these shopping centers. And no, it comes from mines, and especially in Zaire and Congo, and it's mined by children who every year die by an
Every year.
astronomical number. China's mines are not, they don't care about children, but these are black children who supposedly the Democratic Party cares for.
China doesn't care about its own children too much less does it care about black ones. You can look at open Chinese government policy in China, and I've been to China many times. Restaurants that are yellow and white only, no Africans. It actually says no blacks.
Wow.
They say that blacks are the carriers of HIV and of COVID.
Man,
White only, just like Jim Crow South.
Yeah.
They are the plantation owners of Africa.
Yeah.
And these kids are the slaves. But nobody says anything. Obama
says
won't say anything about it.
Oh.
You see, you have to understand something. Let's look at Iran. The way there's something of a attempted uprising in Iran now, that happened during the first administration of Obama. He said and did nothing.
No.
Women's rights abuses. They were hanging homosexuals in the streets from cranes, literally hanging them and letting them hang there. Okay? Every kind of human rights abuse is imaginable and supporting terror. And Obama said nothing. He'll only talk about women's rights and homosexual rights in the United States. He doesn't care about women's rights or homosexual rights. Well, it's the same. These people don't care about the things they say they care about. They are only instruments of political manipulation of stupid, naive, undiscerning people.
Yeah.
It's media psychology to control morons, and it works. That's all it is. They don't care about carbon footprints. These people are flying on executive jets. John carries something like 600 tons from his private jet in the last 3 years. Yeah. John Kerry, the Clintons have their private, all of them. And the Hollywood set, Leonardo DiCaprio, they all have their private jets, the funders of the Democratic Party. It is feudalism. Yeah. Feudalism. The nobility do what they want. Everybody else is a serf or a slave. So the kids digging in the mine in Africa for the cobalt, in the Congo, they're the slaves. Yeah. Okay. Working people in the United States and Europe, they're the serfs. Okay. The political bureaucrat class and the media, the Don Lemons of this world, and the racial maddos of this world, and these kinds of people, and Scarborough and all these people, Joe Scarborough, they are the vassals. Okay, they're the vassals, and then the top is the robber barons.
Yeah,
it is simply they're the nobility. It's BlackRock, it's Goldman Sachs. It is simply feudalism. Yeah. They don't care about the environment. They have bamboozled stupid people into thinking electricity comes out of a wall. We have electric cars, they don't pollute. You have to generate the electricity somehow. It's coming from coal or natural gas. It doesn't matter if you power the vehicle on a fossil fuel or you burn the fossil fuel in a generator. The electricity does not come from a wall. Stupid people think it does. And they know most people are stupid.
Yeah.
They've done the stupidity of the public who believe what they hear in the mainstream media.
Yeah, they've done a great job through schools and media.
Absolutely.
And I recently saw just a picture, it was a random picture of a guy with the Tesla. The guy with the Tesla. People love those cars, I guess. They have this Tesla, and he couldn't find a charging station because they don't have enough here in California. So he's charging it with the generator, which he used diesel generator to charge his electric car. And he thought he never got the point. He just didn't understand that, that he was doing great for the environment. Well, guys like Al Sharpton on MSNBC who tells you the biggest problem in the world is carbon. This is, has no business being on TV, let alone a pulpit.
Yeah, that man cannot even speak in coherent sentences, in grammatically correct sentences. In fact, he's from that school of thought that says diction with good grammar is racist.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Now, Jacob, we see the attack on children. I want you to get your take on this. Noted transhumanist and World Economic Forum member and speaker, Yuval Noah Harari, his new venture, children's books, believe it or not. We looked at a picture of the book earlier. It's called Unstoppable Us. It's geared for children. Volume 1 has come out. There's 3 more, so a total of 4. Basically talking about how humans took over the world and men are dangerous. This is Klaus Schwab's main man. Okay, so he speaks at World Economic Forum events. He speaks all over the world. He speaks at tech companies and places like that. What is he doing writing children's books? I mean, my suspicion.
He's a homosexual. Okay, he's a homosexual. Okay, he's politically left wing in Israel, but he's a homosexual. Okay, and he's not a scientist or anything of that nature. He's a professor of medieval history. In other words, he's an expert on feudalism. He's an academic expert on feudalism, which explains most of the question. Explains the premise of what he is. He's an academic expert on feudalism.
Yeah.
So that's why he's the ideologue of the World Economic Forum and of Schwab. Okay, that's the basis. What he is saying is something that we and others, and I was not the first one, but I was among the first, but I was not the first, that said the reason that Darwinism will decrease is because they will think with biogenetic engineering we can replace Darwinism and determine genetic outcome by human design. Okay, so what he's basically saying is it's the end of the Darwinistic worldview, which was anti-God. Now we're going to go into the deification of man. We shall be God. It's no longer evolution that controls, but us. So therefore, God was already obsolete or the concept of God was already obsolete in the Darwinian age. But now we are post-Darwinist. God is only a fantasy, a ridiculous notion. And this must be communicated to children at as early age as possible. And of course, the teachers' unions and the school systems will accommodate it. Don't forget, in the United States, which spends more money on education per child than any other major economy in the world, reading and math skills are and particularly science skills, are at a 40-year all-time low. Only 23% of American school teachers, only 23%, are from the top third of their class, compared to countries like Singapore and Finland.
Finland, yeah.
Okay. Good teachers, particularly in STEM fields, are underpaid. The others, well, when you pay peanuts, only monkeys apply for the job. Good teachers are underpaid. Bad teachers should be working in fast food joints. Do you want fries with this? Because that is their level of intelligence.
Yeah.
But the unions only represent the bad teachers, not the good ones. And the teachers' unions are in diametric opposition to the interests of the children and the national economy long term.
Yeah.
It's about indoctrination. It's not about education. And the unions are political campaign funds for the Democratic Party. Only 23% of teachers are from the top third of their class. You're paying some ridiculous imbecile to teach things like gender studies. or feminist studies or some stupid garbage, useless garbage economically. They'll never get a job in high tech. Okay. While you have math teachers who can make 2 to 3 times as much money working in the computer industry.
Yeah.
A math teacher is doing it sacrificially. They're underpaid, underrespected, underappreciated, most of them. To have some morons who are only there to indoctrinate children and are too stupid to know they're stupid. You've got teachers who are too stupid to know they're stupid.
Harari's message, he says, is to change the worldview of children, he says.
Yes,
That's
and the school systems will do it.
Yeah, and it's marketed. Obviously, it's not just for United States, it's for different parts of the world. Harari has convinced an audience, he says, because he's been doing interviews on this, that God is a made-up story. He says he's done his job already of convincing people God is a made-up story, and he wants to make people cooperative, which is, he introduces some ideas here. His next book, by the way, is going to be on the agricultural revolution. So that's a fascinating thing to me, to think about what this man is going to teach children about the agricultural revolution. But here's some of the parts of his current book, Jacob. The history of humanity begins with evolution, he says, and the last common ancestors of humans are chimpanzees. So he begins with the idea of evolution, which I thought he was against it, but he says God is a fairy tale. The third subject is on marriage. Now, what can he tell kids about marriage? He himself is in a homosexual relationship.
Yes.
He says people have one partner for their entire lifetime. Some people have more partners.
Yep, some people have multiple wives and so on, yes.
Yeah, several women at the same time. 2 men can get married to each other, and so can 2 men. 2 women can get married to each other, and so can 2 men. Basically, destroying the idea of a family and marriage. He says the deadliest people on earth are humans, and we need to make reparations. He ends the book with reparations to
make reparations to the rats and to the locusts.
Yeah, reparations. And of course, this feeds into his agenda about the useless eaters and the World Economic Forum taking control of the world and the economy of the world and make you eat bugs and things like that. It goes hand in hand. It's geared to children.
They grabbed 3,000 farms in Holland. Now they want to teach children why it should happen.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, the effects of the World Economic Forum just laser pointing at kids through this man. Children's book. I couldn't believe it when I first read it.
I'm telling you, there's a reason they chose a professor of medieval history as the ideologue. He understands feudalism.
How to get people in that system and make them think that they're actually doing a good thing. Jacob, let's finish off this part of the catching up with what's going on in Israel. I don't think Netanyahu has formed his coalition yet.
No, he's still negotiating because the religious parties, he knows, will have to be kept under some kind of restraint. Yeah. And obviously, they're making the political blackmail demands that religious parties have always made.
Yeah. And but he wants to push a peace deal. One of his agendas is with Saudis, to transform the Middle East, he says. Now, kind of walk me through that, Jacob. What would be his thoughts on that? And
because of Biden, Israel is becoming uncomfortably closer to China, not strategically, but it realizes certain economic realities that affect it. Secondly, because they know they can't trust the United States anymore since Obama and Biden. They could under Trump, it was different. Now you got another problem. The United States is not exactly calm about Israel's relationship with China. Secondly, the United States has become alienated from Saudi Arabia. The common threat of Iran. The House of Saud will have to look elsewhere since they can't trust Biden. Where else are they going to look? To somebody who has that kind of military muscle. They're going to look to the Israelis. That is what it comes to. The so-called Abraham Accords will simply provide the framework for those kinds of negotiations to take place. However, I assure you, those negotiations have already been taking place. Those negotiations have been going on for nearly a year.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is not the first time we hear about the Saudis wanting to make peace with Israel of some sort. But now it's Netanyahu. It's not Naftali Bennett anymore. And maybe they feel like they have a better chance to do it with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's been a big fan of the Abraham Accords. In fact, it plays a role in this because he's called the Saudis to become part of the Abraham Accords. This is under Trump. This is under Netanyahu's previous term. And now it's here. And the possibility of expanding this it's big, he says, because we'd like to have a historic peace agreement with the Saudis.
Yes,
that would be something. I've never thought it would be interesting. I never thought it would be like this.
That, of course, will push the Sunni population of the West Bank and Gaza further in the direction of Iran.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's already force of Iran, getting all these satellite terrorist organizations to become their proxy, and it will create even more. Just we're coming down to the end of our catching up. Just want to make sure everybody remembers to send in your questions. We're going to put Jacob up in the hot seat in just a few minutes, but if you send in your questions now through Rumble, we'll make sure that Jacob gets it. We had some left over from last week, Jacob, so we'll make sure that Jacob, just real quick before we finish, the Gaza Strip, it's becoming again problematic. It's always been since the time that Sharon surrendered the Gaza Strip, that part to Hamas. Hamas won the election way back in 06, 04, 05, 06, and now it's been a thorn on the side of Israel for some time now.
Well, since the time that the Saudi-owned and operated Bush-Cheney administration knifed Israel on the back and forced Israel to make a unilateral withdrawal from Gaza without any provisions or guarantees.
None.
For peace and non-aggression. The Israelis no sooner left when the Gaza Strip simply became a base to launch Katyusha rockets at Sderot, Ashkelon, and the outskirts of Tel Aviv, courtesy of Bush, Cheney, and the House of Saud Incorporated, the Carlyle Group connection, etc. That is what happened. You can blame these things on George, Bush, and Cheney.
The Saudis played a role in that. Now they might play a role again because there's some Palestinian terrorists that want to be released in exchange from Israeli prisons. This is what Hamas.
Yeah, the Israelis will have to release 2,000 prisoners to get back one Israeli soldier. That's the way these negotiations always go.
That's the way
they know the Jews will do it. While Muslims, the Islamists, don't care about their own people. They don't care about their own children. They know that the Israelis do. So one Jewish life is worth 2,000 Muslim lives. I wouldn't say that. I would say one Jewish life is worth 10,000 Muslim lives, but it's a good deal.
Yeah, I mean they're going to hold over the Israelis over a barrel over this because they want this deal to result in more terrorists being released.
Well, not only that, but the Saudi Arabians will make the release of Islamic terrorists by the Israelis a condition for improving relations with Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Arabians will be desperate to find ways to appease the Palestinian Arabs in Gaza and the West Bank if they make friends with the Israelis. They're going to have to show we can deliver something. We're getting something for you as a result of this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is the way the chess game is being played.
Horrible negotiations.
This has been going on for these negotiations have been under discussion for months and months and months that I know of. Give me a year that I know of. And I don't have that much access to secret information.
Well, the reality is when you put it all together, and you get down to the scenario of the end of the age, these things take on its life of its own. I mean,
Yes.
we're talking peace. Somebody's going to broker a peace. Someone's going to give the Jews
Yes,
access to
the Antichrist will bring a false peace to the Middle East.
That's right. That's right. So, Jacob, we got some questions for you. Let's put you on the hot seat for just a few minutes, and then we'll get on to backstage. Here we go. Jacob, does the story of Ezekiel laying on his left side for 390 days and 40 days on his right side provide a prophetic type or meaning in our time?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So this is from Ezekiel 4.
Yes.
Line on his left side 390 and then 40 days. So it has some prophetic meaning.
Absolutely. But the 40 is always the time of God's testing.
Awesome.
Okay.
Very good. Do you have a study that you talked about this a little bit more in depth?
We've mentioned it. We've never done one specifically on Ezekiel 4, but we have made reference to the lying on the side on various Bible studies over the years.
Very good. All right. Jacob, what now? The BRICS, what now? The BRICS has dropped the dollar as a standard. We owe China an unbelievable amount of money. Will the U.S. default on their loans?
In the long term, nobody knows about the default bubble. Don't forget, China is defaulting on its internal loans already. It's defaulting on its own loans.
Yes.
Domestically to its own people. It's a much bigger question than the question as phrased.
Yeah, bigger than that.
It is also true that China technically owes the United States over $3 trillion.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about that politically, but the debentures are still there. They're held by a company in Tennessee in escrow. Why not pay back $3 trillion of the Chinese debt with what they owe us? I would. Donald Trump probably would have. The debt game is a game. The debt game is a game.
It is a game.
As long as you hold America's debt, you're going to want your money back. So therefore, in the way the game is played, it in part restrains China from damaging the USA economically for fear that there will be a default.
Yeah.
China does not want to destroy the US economically. What China wants to do to the United States is what China did to Japan. But of course, that was before China's own crisis came to the forefront. Is that a simple answer?
That's a good answer. Good answer. Jacob, believers sold their belongings in the book of Acts. Can you expand on how this foreshadow plays out again, maybe in the very near future?
Okay, well, certainly the principle shows that believers, when led of the Holy Spirit, must be willing to divest themselves of this world's goods for the purposes of advancing or preserving the kingdom of God. Okay, that is true. However, let's look at the following considerations with regard to that particular passage. One, if Jesus Christ told you that your hometown was going to be utterly destroyed and you were going to have to flee it, would you put your house on the market?
Immediately.
Okay. Two, someone that says they sold their lands and so forth. Okay.
Yeah.
Two, God put an end to that with the martyrdom of Stephen. The church spread, taking the gospel with it. It was a temporary provision in the initial phase of church growth. God put an end to it. The believers went away, taking their goods, what they had with them, and spreading the gospel as they went back into the diaspora. 3, in Thessalonians, Paul warns about parasites, those who will simply look for a free ride on the back of the church.
Yeah.
It was not to be a welfare state. There are misguided people, sometimes maybe even corrupt people, but certainly misguided ones, who believe that taking this passage out of context and out of context provides a theological basis for Christian support of socialism.
Yep, I've
People
heard
have
that
tried
before.
to misuse that passage that way.
Yeah.
But they're not looking at the context or the co-text. Same old game. But the principle that everything we have belongs to the Lord, and we need to share with the brethren, with persecuted Christians and things like that, that principle remains in place for all Christians at all times. But it is
Amen.
not designed to convey any kind of paradigm or template for Christian socialism.
Absolutely. I've heard this from people that try to bring socialist ideas or Marxist idea into the Christian faith, and they said, well, look, Christianity has a version of socialism, which is a quote from the book of Acts, and sharing things, and they all held things together. So good answer, Jacob. Jacob, it says hello and thank you both for all that you do. Well, thank you for listening. My question is as if the world is falling apart, how does it say that they will be eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage? So with the world falling apart, how does it work out that other people will be drinking, eating and giving in marriage?
Okay, remember, the Antichrist will counterfeit the millennial reign of Jesus. He will initially create the illusionary or delusionary stability that people long for. And it will seem that things are getting back to some kind of normal or some kind of relative affluence. The world will disintegrate economically and politically and socially, creating a crisis that people will turn to the Antichrist because they've rejected Christ. He will attempt to counterfeit the millennial reign of Jesus in order to ingratiate himself with people who will believe him apart from the faithful church, whom he will persecute bitterly. Okay? During that period, Jesus will come. Once that happens and the faithful church is removed, the Antichrist will turn against the Jews and any remaining believers. That is the most straightforward explanation of your question, which is a valid question.
Very good. Very good. Jacob, the transition, can you explain the transition into the fourth kingdom of Daniel 7, also the image of Daniel 2 that we're currently experiencing, watching it fill the earth, and also if there's other scriptures as well as part of the Lord's, as the Lord's kingdom. I don't understand the last part, but I guess the question is the transition into the fourth kingdom of Daniel 7, also the image of Daniel 2 that we are currently experiencing.
Okay. I believe, some disagree, but I do believe that there is some correlation between the 4 beasts and the 4 sections of the statue. Okay.
Right.
The clearest picture of the image of the beast in Revelation 13 is undoubtedly Daniel chapter 2. We got the play on 6s and so forth, okay?
Yeah.
It's the clearest. Iron does not stick to clay, Daniel says. There will be a need to try to bring about some kind of cohesion, because you're going to have the weak and the strong, the rich and the poor. They will look for somebody who can make iron stick to clay, but the iron won't stick to the clay. They'll look to somebody who can do it.
Yes, that's right.
Okay? Right now, Europe is in crisis. Europe is in crisis. Post-Brexit, Europe is in crisis. Okay. The iron is not sticking to the clay.
That's true.
The economies of Eastern Europe, like Poland and Hungary,
Yeah.
Bulgaria, Romania, they are very much their own players. They are Atlanticists, like the British. In other words, they look to the United States and to the strategic relationship with North America, with the States and Canada, particularly the States. They're Atlanticists. Western Europe are less like that. They want a free ride off the American taxpayer for things like defense, but they are not Atlanticists the way the British are or the way the Eastern Europeans are. You have a divided Europe. You've always had a Europe divided by ultramontanism. That is the countries on the northern side of the Alps and the countries on the southern side. The Renaissance happened one way with Gothic architecture in the north of the Alps, and it happened with like Baroque architecture on the southern side of the Alps. Europe has always had a north-south divide between the Latin countries and the Germanic, Celtic, and Nordic countries. It's always had that divide, okay? Always had that divide. And it has always had an east-west divide between the Eastern Orthodox countries and the Roman Catholic countries. It has always had that divide. Iron does not stick to clay. The period of transition we are in now can easily, or most easily, I should say, not easily, but most easily be understood by correctly interpreting Daniel chapter 2.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Jacob. I think we have some studies on Daniel 7 and 2. I don't remember correctly, but they're on your book for sure, Shadows of the Beast. So if people get a hold of that, that'd be great. Jacob, here's a question. Why was Israel called Palestine by the Europeans when Palestine wasn't even a name? No one, the old Europeans, knew it was Israel. It was only Palestina. However, the land.
Let's go back to the 2nd century.
Yeah.
After the Second Jewish Revolt, not 70 AD, but the one with Bar Kokhba, we're talking 120 to 132 AD or CE, during the time of the Emperor Hadrian and what followed. After the Jews revolted against Rome the second time under Bar Kokhba, punitively, the Romans changed the name of the land to the name of Israel's ancient enemies, the Philistines, Philistia. The original Philistines were Indo-Grecian. They were not Arabs. They were from Crete. Okay? They were from the Greek Aegean. Okay? They were not Arab people. An ethnic Palestinian has not existed in at least 2,500 to 3,000 years, nearly, okay? These are just people who live in the land that the Romans renamed Philistine. In Hebrew, Philistin. Arabic, similar, Philistin. Latin, Palestine. The only thing Palestine means is Philistine. Only the Arabs of the Gaza and the West Bank are not ethnic Philistines, much like Euro-Americans, Afro-Americans, and Asian Americans and Hispanic Americans are not indigenous Americans. Apaches are, Navajo are, Comanches are, but European, Black, Hispanic, Asian Americans are not ethnic Americans. So too the Arabs are not ethnic Palestinians. They just live in this land that the Romans renamed in the 2nd century. That is how it happened. I've lost the sound.
Oh, we'll move on to the next question. Let me finish the question too before you get started. So, Jacob, what are your thoughts on Hanukkah Rav Shlomo Yehuda being claimed as the Messiah of Israel? I guess he's the newest claim.
Okay, because the 24/7 vigil in Queens, New York, at the grave of Menachem Schneerson has thus far proved disappointing because he didn't get out of his grave. They have to get another false Messiah.
Yeah.
Even though some of the more extreme Lubavitch will still believe he's the Messiah. Well, let's go back. Acts chapter 5, Yehuda of Galilee, or Simon Bar Kokhba, or Jacob Frank, or Shabbatai Tzvi, in more modern terms, Menachem Schneerson. He is just the next false Messiah in a long dynasty of false messiahs. When you reject the true Messiah, you're going to get a false one.
Absolutely. Jacob, we look at things from a biblical perspective. Do you have any suggestions on how to approach a non-believer who may see the same things but do not have a biblical perspective?
Yes. First of all, realize when you're talking about them, you're not talking about the events themselves. You're using the events apologetically for purposes of evangelism. In other words, you're trying to witness to the person and share your faith, and with the help of God, see them come to faith in Jesus. Okay. What you do is very rationally show them the predictions in Scripture and the fulfillments. And you make it clear, look, this is not like Nostradamus or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's not a matter of interpretation. These were literal prophecies about his first coming, that he'd be born in Bethlehem, who his ancestors would be. His friend would betray him for a price. The price the friend would betray him for. They'd gamble for his clothes. We know these things were written before the time of Jesus. We can prove with archaeology that the Hebrew scriptures were written before he was born. And he fulfilled all of those things. Even his enemies admitted he rose from the dead. So, just as it was there for his first coming, now let's look at the predictions of his second coming. After 2,000 years being scattered, the Jews would come back to Israel. After 2,000 years of rejecting Jesus as the Messiah, Jews are beginning to believe in him again in conspicuous numbers. Look what it says in Romans 11 is going to happen. Globalization of the world currency into some kind of a digital currency with a number that can be subcutaneously implanted. How could that have been even thought of by anybody? But here it is. Show them very rationally and literally the fulfillment of prophecy concerning his first coming and say, now it's happening with his second. Use the prophecies evangelistically.
Absolutely. It's always been to the point where we lead with the events, but get back to because the events won't save them. The events is the fact that they see it. It's a plus. Jacob, here's an interesting question. I know you like Groucho Marx. He says he watched an interview with them and he said that NASA were anti-Semitic. Is that credible?
No, Groucho Marx very rarely said serious things in interviews, unless he was talking about his family and his relationship with his brothers and his childhood. Unless he was talking about his family, and those occasions were few and far between. In his interviews, they were always punctuated and peppered with humor. So if he said something like that, it was part of a joke, or he was setting people up for a joke.
Gotcha. Jacob, 5 Italian families like the Orsini, and also one Jewish family, the Rothschild, the top tier control of this world system? Question mark.
Say it again.
The 5 Italian families like the Orsini family,
right?
Also the one Jewish family, Rothschild, top tier controlling this world system, question mark. How do you know the Rothschilds were Jewish, are they?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Okay, the House of Rothschild was founded by Meyer Amschel Rothschild. He believed the only way to stop the anti-Semitism in Europe was to have political influence. But Jews couldn't have any political influence, but they could get economic influence. So he believed in developing economic influence as a way to have political influence to stop anti-Semitism. But it never worked. The Holocaust happened anyway. Okay. The Soviet Union began persecuting Jews anyway. His idea has never worked.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the international banking establishment. And most of it is based in New York and London. There is some in Luxembourg and Switzerland and the Far East. But those other major banks, like Macquarie Bank in Australia, or Credit Suisse, which is in big trouble now, or even Deutsche Bank, although that is closer, these banks are not minor league, but second-tier players to the big investment banks. The investment banks are different than commercial banks. Investment banks are interested in things like initial public offers, day trading, things of that nature, IPOs. That is their basis. Now, let's look at these big banks, the biggest banks. The Rothschilds are based in France and in England. But the biggest bank in Great Britain, or the biggest banking dynasty in Britain, are the Barclays brothers. Barclays. They are English Roman Catholics. Okay. Let's look at the United States. Goldman Sachs was founded by two Jews, Goldman and his son-in-law Sachs. But not all of the CEOs of Goldman Sachs are Jews or have been Jews. Whitehead reinvented Goldman Sachs. He was not a Jew. Hank Paulson, who was George Bush's Secretary of State, professed to be an evangelical Protestant. The bank was founded by Jews. America's biggest banking dynasty with the Mellon family out of Pittsburgh and New York, not Jews. Okay. Chase Manhattan. Chase was not a Jew. He was back in the 19th century. Either was Jay Gould or any of the founders of these banking establishments. But the biggest banker in American history, J.P. Morgan, not a Jew. Brown Brothers Harriman, not a Jew. Are there Jews in it? Sure. But if you look at the big funds like BlackRock and Fidelity and things, Mr. Johnson and Abigail Johnson are not Jews. That's their Fidelity. BlackRock, the same. David Rockefeller, not a Jew, was chairman of Chase Manhattan. And Donald Risk was chairman of Citicorp, not a Jew. You cannot say it is a Jewish conspiracy. It's ridiculous. The majority of these people are not Jewish, although there are certainly Jews in it and always have been.
Look, the devil's always...
managers. Let's go to Silicon Valley and high tech, to the new robber barons. Okay. Is Bezos a Jew? No. Is Bill Gates a Jew? No. Is Warren Buffett a Jew who invests a lot in high tech? Well, no. Is the founder of Apple, Job, a Jew? No. Is his successor, Tim Cook, a Jew? No. Darcy, the Twitter guy?
Jack Dorsey.
Dorsey, yeah, is a Jew? No. None of them are Jewish. Now you've got Jews in it. You've got Larry Page, who's half Jewish, and you've got obviously our notorious friend from Facebook,
Zuckerberg.
Zucky. You've got Jews in it, But to say it's a Jewish enterprise is ridiculous. Or the same as Hollywood. Disproportionate amount of Jewish talent and influence, yeah. And it's done well for America. The founder of Hollywood was Cecil B. DeMille. He was not a Jew. The biggest in financial terms, producer in financial terms in Hollywood was what's his name? The Star Wars guy that he was bought out by Disney, but
Lucas. Yeah, Lucas.
Lucas, George Lucas. He's not a Jew. Who's the biggest conglomerate in Hollywood? They own almost everything. Disney. Is Walt Disney a Jew? No. Be careful of people saying this. Yeah, there's a lot of Jews in Hollywood. But it doesn't mean they're bad. And it doesn't mean they're all left wing or whatever. You've got like people like Jerry Bruckheimer and not Vice guy, what's his name? The Ocean's 11 guy, the really big producer. His son is a Jewish believer. I know him. A friend of Dave Hunt. Not Bruckheimer is a conservative leaning Republican. But the other one is begins with a W. Weinstein, not Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein was Democrat.
Yeah.
Weingrad. What's his name?
The Weingrad?
No, the other. Weintraub.
Weintraub. Okay.
Weintraub. Again, a Republican. Be careful of people who say these things. Yes, there are Jews in these things, all of them. And there's maybe even a disproportionately large number of Jews in them. But to say that they're Jewish enterprises is factually untrue and purely anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Look, I always say, look, the devil's going to use Gentiles and Jews to destroy the
right. Yeah.
And he's always done it, and he's done it, with whoever's available for his usage. So
now I will say one thing. The Jews were to be lights to the nations because Jesus was a Jew. Because grace and truth came from Jesus, because righteousness came from Jesus, okay? Because God used the Jew to bring light into the world. Satan will use Jews to bring darkness into the world.
Yeah. No,
the Antichrist will in some way, the Antichrist and false prophet, one of them will in some way be a Jew.
Yeah.
Because they'll have to counterfeit Jesus. Go ahead, Mark.
Jacob, would you consider doing a study on Ezekiel 4? That's one of the questions.
I would consider it, yes.
Okay. Jacob, is it possible that the issue of immigration as a global migration with visions of new governors, is it possible that immigration issue is a global migration with visions of governance as emerging?
It relates to the Antichrist arising at a time in Daniel with the conflict between the kings of the north and the kings of the south, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, the developed world and the developing world. It relates to that, but it's a big subject.
Yeah. Jacob, thoughts on, it's on, it's on Shadows. It's on Shadows, yeah. What is your thoughts on Ectolife, the baby pod facility manufacturing babies? Do they have souls?
We have dealt with this issue again in Shadows of the Beast.
Yeah.
When you genetically construct a human being, okay, where will its soul come from? This will in part relate, but I can't go into it now, to the prophecies about the Nephilim.
Yeah.
Where will the souls come from?
Yeah.
Okay. Where will the souls come from if a human is an automaton?
Yeah.
And these things will have to be automatons. They will be organic, but they will be organically interactive with silicone. It'll be both carbon and silicone.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Shadows. So read Shadows of the Beast for that one.
Shadows of the Beast, yes.
Jacob, last one. What do you expect from the next generation who are kids getting brainwashed? When they grow up, will the moral decline be exponential?
It will become like the way the Roman Empire was in the first century and in the second century.
Yeah.
That is the way it is going to be. The unnatural will be considered socially normative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Even though, because people are still made in a man's image and likeness, they will question it privately. socially and culturally, the unnatural will be considered to be natural.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jacob. We got a lot of questions today. We had some held over from last time, but thank you so much for that. And
Thank you.
How to record it. Well, that would conclude catching up with Jacob. We're about to move into backstage, so just people to start migrating over now. So get out of
Please
YouTube.
do so. Come to
Yeah.
Moriel.tv, morieltv.org. Come to Rumble. Come to something, but get off of YouTube.
We can't talk about these things, and Jacob will get into a lot of trouble if he were to talk about these things. We got stuff about the Marriage Act, the dragophobia, stuff about the mRNA vaccine, Robert Malone, all that stuff. It's coming up.
Yes.
Let's move over.